Hi, everyone here and around the world. Good news. We have broken through 285,000 subscribers, and deep thanks to all of you for your support. And since last week's March 19th, 2025 Earthfiles broadcast with Dan Drasin, author of A New Science of the Afterlife, Space, Time, and the Consciousness Code, a lot of you have emailed your own experiences. And tonight, I would like to share some of those along with Dan Drasin's comments. And let's start with Earthfiles viewer Judy Godwin, who wrote in last week's March 19th, 2025 Earthfiles chat, quote, "This is such an amazing subject. When I was 21, my grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer. He was placed on hospice and was at his own home. I got the call from my grandmother that he is coming to his end. I was so close to him and drove like a mad woman trying to get there in time. When I got to his bedroom with loved ones all around his bed, he was breathing rapidly, and he looked at me and slouched over. My poor grandmother ran out of the room sobbing. Everyone was crying, but I just knew to keep watching him. Suddenly, his head came up, and he looked at me smiling with the strength of a well man. He didn't even look sick. And he said to me, quote, 'Baby, it's all right. It's beautiful. I am so happy. I love you.' And he died with a smile on his face. That was 40 years ago. I have since been studying frequency nodes and the alien presence among other paranormal phenomena. And I thank you, Linda, Ian, and all of Earthfiles for all of your hard work. Dan Drasin, what is your reaction to this from Judy Godwin?"
Well, Judy, thanks so much. And apart from any explanations, the experience itself of connecting with your grandfather at that moment must have spoken volumes to you about the nature of love and its place in the greater scheme of things.
And Dan, what do you think that particular story gives as an insight into what is increasing numbers of astrophysics papers about us being in a universe in which it is much greater, more infinite than we could even imagine? And what is the relationship between human consciousness and that universe?
Wow. All of these experiences that folks are having, whether within themselves or with loved ones, communication with the other side, communication with non-terrestrial consciousnesses, it really all points in the same direction. That the universe is infinite. It's a place of infinite variety and perhaps infinite levels of reality. And I think ultimately everything is made out of consciousness. We look at the universe basically stepped down or crystallized versions of that same universal precious stuff. And I think consciousness is about the closest we can come to labeling it in any meaningful way. It's probably a lot greater than what we think of as consciousness. We're so limited by language. We're just doing the best we can with this.
And you and I and the wonderful Earthfiles audience, we are having this discussion because the Pentagon recently released a headline saying that there seems to be evidence that consciousness is infinite because it's energy and energy cannot be destroyed. Then bringing it in the news from the Pentagon, reincarnation is probably actually real.
Well, whether the Pentagon says so or not, there's evidence for reincarnation. It's not even a question at this point in time. But I think it's useful that the quote-unquote authorities have come to terms with this enough to really come out and say it.
And one of the Earthfiles viewers, Mountain Yeti Barbie, she wrote, quote, "It's harder than any loss that I've ever known." And she's referring to the death of a loved one. "It's been 25 years since I read Betty Eadie's book, Embraced by the Light. I have felt that this can't be the end. Dolores Cannon was very instrumental in her beliefs that we choose our missions, and we like to surround ourselves with our certain souls and work with them over and over in varying capacities. This is a theory I can embrace and feel good about. It makes sense, like when you meet someone in this life that you feel an instant bond with, like you've known them forever. It's just possible that this is one of your circle of souls that you've been with in another capacity, another time. I'm trying to be relieved that my son is not hurting anymore, but right now all I can feel is how much I miss him in my life.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And, no matter how sophisticated we might be about the afterlife and the greater reality, on the human level, loss is still loss, and it hurts. And at the same time, I don't think there's any doubt that so many souls who are close to us, friends, relatives, pets, have been together over lifetimes.
At Tilred112 came this quote, "In 1979, my oldest brother was killed in drunk driving accident. It was his fault. He was driving under the influence. It happened just down the road from my mother and father's home. My other two brothers and I were still living at home, and my oldest brother had just gotten home from serving in the Army. The next day after the crash, the house phone rang. I answered it. It was a little staticky, and I said hello a couple of times. And the next thing I knew, I heard my dead brother's voice. He said my name. Only people I grew up with or family could pronounce my name correctly. I was scared, but chalked it up to neighborhood kids pulling a prank, and I hung up on the phone. But I still think about it often."
Well, losing your brother in that way must have been a really painful experience. It sounds as if your brother really was doing his best to make contact. It's actually quite common, and I think that if more people felt comfortable sharing these kinds of experiences, we'd soon learn that they're not paranormal at all, but actually quite normal. My own belief is that the more we regard them as normal, the more often they'll happen, and the more natural and casual these conversations will become.
Yes, and we are hearing more, and people do want as much information as they can get about this issue of the moment of death, what comes next, and if consciousness is infinite and always there, what exactly does happen in these recycles in which people do seem to remember other lives.
Right.
There is another here from Mike Chambers, 3605. Quote, "Back in the 1960s, I had an out-of-body experience in a seminar room at Brock University. I thought I might have had a heart attack, so I tried to calm down. Suddenly, I was above the group, looking down. I had that wow feeling. It was so exciting and amazing, and I remember thinking, how can I see from up here when my eyes are down there? And I stayed, not wanting to break what was happening, for about 25 minutes. And when I finally moved to get up, I was suddenly back behind my eyes." Close quote.
Well, Mike, good for you being able to maintain that out-of-body state for 25 minutes, in spite of your fears and concerns. I'm wondering whether you ever delved into the work of the Monroe Institute or of other teachers such as William Buhlman, who provide techniques for achieving and sustaining out-of-body states. And that's a fairly well-developed body of information and teaching. And there's a related talent is known as lucid dreaming, in which we're consciously awake in the dream and can actually create our own dream realities. I sometimes think of lucid dreaming as a sort of kindergarten of the afterlife. One very good resource to start with is Robert Waggoner's excellent book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self.
And thank you, Dan Drasin. Some UFO and human experiencers say they've seen a body open up. Sometimes they think it's themselves in two places, but they see what looks like a human body open up, and it's like a glowing form of a human comes out. and they think it's their soul, and that the soul is emerging, but they don't understand what is happening. Other human experiencers say that they have been told specifically that divine intelligence creates all life forms to evolve beyond the dark to the light, always protecting and preserving souls to the end of time and infinity. If that is true, why isn't agape love the natural state of all consciousness in this universe and on Earth, including human to human on this planet? Wasn't that what the historic avatars were trying to accomplish? Why do power and barter always seem to prevail? Perhaps this particular universe and its dimensions are a holographic coliseum where the warriors in combat are the yin and yang trying to harvest souls throughout infinity for different reasons. And now let's go to my dear friend Ian Holling in England for your comments and questions tonight. And I wonder if any of you have had out-of-body experiences or NDE, near-death experiences, that you are comfortable to share now in this Earthfiles chat tonight. Plus, I want to give a shout out to Muffin and Mike in the audience tonight. And Muffin is Mike's cat. Now, Ian, are you there?
Yeah, hi Linda. Thank you very much for that. And straight off the bat, we've got Nini says about her NDE. When I had my NDE, I learned so much in such a short span. Understand the other side is our home. We come here to learn, then we go back home. We should note this is a school, and that ties in nicely with what Gizmo has said as a question. Do you believe Earth is a school of consciousness, and we are here to learn and move on after death?
I definitely do. I think that it goes all the way back to when I was in Los Angeles working for KNBC as a reporter. And this probably then was the year 1969 to 70, that time period. And there was some sort of a large cocktail type party that was given by someone, a producer or something at KNBC, and I was invited to go. And so it was full of people in nice dress, and they were serving very nice food. And a very tall, that was the first thing that I remember in that room. It was like when you're in a crowd of people, it's like almost everybody is the same, and one person stands out. It's sort of significant, but it was the height. I'm 5'2", and this man who approached me, I didn't know who he was. He probably would have been, with a measurement, close to 6'9", maybe 7 feet tall. He was wearing a suit and everything normal, but it was the energy and the height. And on 1,000 Bibles, knowing that I had no idea that until September of 1979, a whole decade later, that I would be investigating bloodless, trackless animal mutilations, abductions, and everything related to UFOs and ETs. This is now a decade before. It was this man's height and his direction walking to me. And he opened up and said, I'd like you to know that I've seen you on the reporting, and you need to understand that we're not alone in this universe, and that there are all kinds of life forms, and then proceeded to outline a piece of history of something having to do with our Earth and extraterrestrials in the past. And I kept thinking, as he talked, as if the talking to me was something that he was going to do no matter what. Why is this man talking to me about ETs and UFOs? I didn't know that a decade later it would take over my life. I have always been haunted who was that at the NBC cocktail party in what would have been somewhere around 69 to 70, talking to me about UFOs and ETs as if this was established fact and that he knew something about my future. Those are the moments in life that it seems to me that something is knocking, and there have been many like that we have consciousness, that we have radio and TV antennas aiming information at us, and depending upon the sensitivity of our, I think, soul and its relationship with the body and all of the other factors that we still don't understand at all about the universe that we're in, that it is like a matrix that has vibrating frequencies, and that you, I, all of us can pick them up at certain times for reasons that are not clear. But eventually, over a lifetime, you stand and you look back at the landscape of where you've been, and you say, wow, this led to this, this led to this, this led to this, this led to this. And if we all lived with that kind of sensitivity, and we avoided that which was warned, and we went fast toward that which seems to be positive, maybe what a different world we would be in. Now, with that as a kind of opener, Ian, I'm wondering what other comments that we have tonight from the chat, from people who have had their own NDEs or encounters or whatever.
Yes, thank you everybody in the audience for sharing these fantastic experiences that you've had with your NDEs, etc. Andrew Rollins says, I leave my body as a ball of light. As this ball of light, I could see 360 degrees. And I want to just bring you another one here as well, where Leslie Cruz says, in a few of my experiences, I would see a cord tether to me as I jumped out of my body and travelled into space. I'm consciously aware of the entire experience and I can control my travels. So these are two people who are in our audience tonight who seem to have some control over their out-of-body experiences, etc.
And the question hanging on the other side of that is, why do the vast majority of people not? Why is it? And is the answer that the soul itself is what is going to determine how much you hear from other frequencies and what your life, you'll be presented all sorts of options in any given life, and that there are things that have just repelled me and there are other things that have excited me, and I have tried to always follow that which feels positive. If you didn't, what would happen if it was just a 50-50 chance of any meeting, of anything you did, that it could be evil? Do you see what I mean? If you are built in with consciousness and a soul that already picks up these differences between the yin and the yang, the dark and the light in the Colosseum of this universe, that might be one of the most important and valuable aspects of living, dying, recycling that we could all learn. It's amazing that we don't have more straightforward factual discussion, but that may be because it always leads to longer lives and the brilliance of extraterrestrials that are known to humans who live on this planet and interact with extraterrestrials, no matter how many different systems they're from, it's happening. And so that means humanity is always on a fractured landscape with people of certain experiences that penetrate the truth in a different way than others, and that leads to arguments and fights. I just wonder, for the people that you are getting insights from in the chat, is there anyone here tonight who feels that they have in dream, in out of body, in maybe even a NDE to an afterlife experience, where they felt that they were being talked to specifically by either an advanced soul or by non-humans about this very fact, that if we went with our soul and what it felt, it might reduce conflict.
I don't know about the conflict side of things here. We'll wait for our audience response, but enlightened executive Dennis in the audience tonight says, I have out-of-the-body experiences frequently with 2 ETs at both sides, taken up out of the top of my head and lifted through a tunnel into space.
What do those ETs look like? Which category are they in?
We're always saying this. Please tell us what type of ETs.
Yeah.
Okay, Dennis. Please tell us as we go to another question.
Since we're on a planet, since we're on a planet where the political decision is that none of us should know the truth, maybe the more we know the truth from fellow beings, the better we will be. So that's why I like to know at least what were the ETs like in what category.
Linda, you say, why don't we all do this, etc. I've got JG in the audience tonight, and she says, I've had one of my out-of-body experience once. I did it on purpose. I floated down the hall to the kitchen, and I think this was when she was a child, and I heard my mother talking. Then I freaked out and slammed back into my body. Never tried again. I guess for some people, and this is the first time I've heard it, they find that they've accidentally done an out-of-body experience, and it's frightened them so much, and they've thought that perhaps they were close to death or something else had happened, and they've gone back into their body and never been able to recover that, and never wanted to.
Well, I'll both describe something and post it as a question through you to the audience about whether others have ever experienced this. When I was at first grade, which would have been, I think, age 6, as if something, and again, I think I intuit that it is my soul, but for quite a long time at that young age, without talking to anybody, not my mom, dad, or anybody, going to bed for me was as if something took over and that what it wanted me to do and seemed to show me things in my mind's eye that I would begin to follow, and to follow was not to get out of bed. To follow was the feeling of being in bed and then being out of me and in the air and following symbols and following shades of light that would then take me to what I understood at that young age was moving through the universe. And that the challenge, it was presented to me, get to the end of infinity. And I did that for a very long time. And today, from 83 revolutions around the sun, after 6, when I think back and get that feeling, it was as if I was being shown infinity, and I was somehow connecting my soul to that process, as if there was something new about accomplishing it. And I've always wondered, because I've never talked about this really with people, how many other people were at age 5 or 6 may have been led, guided in this floating out into what seems to be like infinity, with control was the point, and then coming back and doing that every single night. I just find it fascinating looking back at things that I vividly remember, but I have never talked about with people before. And I wonder how many of you may have had some similar experience or know something about what would be behind a nightly ritual of trying to move out from the bed and the body without getting physically out, and being able to control going to the edge of infinity and then returning. I just find it fascinating now. But at the time and in the rest of my life, I never felt comfortable talking about it. So I lay that out there as a possibility that a lot of introductions to truths that don't involve politicians may have been going on this planet going back to when Phoenicians and Sumerians and all of the others were here. And this is the so-called modern world. But that link between something in us that is palpable and you can feel it in your chest and traveling in a strange way and then returning. I know that there are other disciplines that do that. Why are we not taught that officially? And who gives the space for a child to start doing that? Okay, Ian, what are other people saying?
Well, Lady Hyde says, my roommate had an NDE and now she has psychic abilities. This is something we hear quite often, that people seem to come back with an ability. And we also know that many people who have UFO experiences, encounters and interactions with ETs also seem to have extended abilities or come back with these abilities. And I also research in the cryptid community as well. And I've noticed from my own research into that people who have cryptid encounters with the Dogman, with Bigfoot or other cryptids also seem to have this tie-in with NDEs and enhanced psychic abilities too.
And would you define for the Earthfile viewers exactly how the word cryptid is used?
Well, cryptid comes from the study of unknown animals such as cryptozoology, and animals that are not categorized by, let's say, mainstream science are known in this community as cryptids. And I gave you just two of the examples there.
Yeah, when I've used that word, people will say, do you mean reptilians? And so I'm sensitive about it. It could be something that was reptilian but really weird, but the cryptid is sort of out of category.
Yeah, the cryptid would normally refer to the category of, let's say, creatures or animals or entities that we can't quite categorize. And I suppose there is some intersection with reptilians and ETs as well, as I know that people in the abduction scenarios have also encountered cryptids as well, such as the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Dogman.
How many people do you think out of 1,000 experience as if they're being taught to leave the body, even though they're conscious that it's in a bed or something, and it is as if they're being taught something, and yet in human life on Earth, it is rarely discussed or even encountered? What do you think is at the basis of whatever this interaction is about floating out into infinite space? Ian or anybody on the chat?
Well, I think that now, I think many people are experiencing forward with their experiences.
I don't know, Ian. Some of your words came in, and some of your words didn't.
You just turned it off. Okay, I'm going to reconnect it. Leave it alone.
Maybe that's what somebody wanted us to do. So never touch it.
Well, not on the top.
We're trying to reconnect, Ian.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm here. That's good. I'm glad you reconnected me. Okay, I was just going to go back to your question about the number of people who have these experiences. I guess we're going to start hearing more and more where people are more open to discuss this. And also here at Earthfiles, we provide a safe space for people to come here, share your experiences. And you know, this is it. These are taken seriously.
Well, and if you go back in ancient history, think of all of the what would be considered religious categories without applying any names, where the concept of soul, meditation, moving your mind out to explore mountains without having to move the physical body has been a part of Earth literature, lore, and religion for centuries.
That's right. I'm going to suggest when Chris George Alexander says we live in a technological society where a limited number of people experience the communication with afterlife. What if there were a technological civilization where everyone communicated with the afterlife? I guess we're talking about the possibility advanced civilizations such as the ET civilizations that are visiting us may already have that technology. It may just be another technology that we will eventually overcome the veil between life and death, and we'll have a technological answer to direct communication, such as another type of internet or some direct interface with our ourselves, our conscious minds.
Yes, it was surprising to me in 2017 that I had a communication from a person who has long worked in aerospace in the United States. And it was about many things. But one of them was, I've heard you talk about the tall whites versus the grays versus the reptilians versus the blues and so forth. And said, I wanted you to know that I have firsthand information that the tall whites, which are different from the Nordics, he was the one who said that he had worked in an engineering capacity with a full-blood, I guess what we'd call Nordic type of ET, and that it looked just like anybody who was living in Norway, Finland, and the Scandinavian countries of our planet. And he said, I have worked enough with the tall whites, and I had just started talking about them, which might be what provoked this interesting information I can't prove, but I think it's fascinating. And he said the tall whites have had a kind of supervisory relationship with the Earth and other ETs. And I said, how long do they live? I just was curious. Somebody had supervisory duties in solar systems. And he said, well, I'm not certain, except that I have been told that they can naturally live to what we would call 850 years, maybe 1,000. And this was the part that I've always been haunted by. But they decide on their own, usually at around 500 and 550 years, to move on past the biological, what we call life. I said, so they can live to be 850 years and they choose to leave in 500 or 550? He said, yeah. Well, why? He said, I've asked that too, and I don't have an answer. There's so many haunting questions, no matter which direction you go. And it seems to me, in a way, summed up. I should have given this to the camera, but here, this is in a science, I don't know if it's aerospace, but it was the title. Scientists have discovered something sort of alarming. The universe shouldn't actually exist. And there are more and more headlines having to do with questions about what were presumed physical laws. And this one sums it up for me. I'm going to frame it and put it on a wall. That to Earth scientists, it is all so contradictory and schizophrenic and strange that now there is a headline that the entire universe shouldn't exist based on what little we know. And if there are extraterrestrials out in various parts of the universe, that essentially, to us, they would have a huge, gigantic length of life and lives to evolve and develop. And we are, on average, between 68 and 72. Who made that decision? So, Ian.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I've always wondered, did we have some sort of restriction placed upon us?
Yeah.
We were given a time limit, an expiry date, and that's the end of it.
And that might be why some of us have all these lessons as little kids about moving out of your body and going out toward infinity and things that are not taught in school. It may be that there's conflict between a variety of extraterrestrial intelligences who they have vested interests in Homo sapien and other life forms. And maybe they are trying to teach ahead of the curve because Earth right now, for example, is just so full of conflict that I just keep praying that somebody with a real soul knowledge could do something to reduce all of the conflict that is in every direction, everywhere. And out of all of this, where are we going to head? And everyone always has the flip answer. Well, we'll have nuclear war and then it'll be over. You have nuclear war and you don't have anything to recover for a very long time. It's horrible. And I'm afraid.
Yeah, we just have to.
I'm afraid that we're living on.
Keep our energies positive.
Yeah, I'm afraid that we're living on a planet where it's flip to say, well, let's have the nuclear war and get it over with. I don't think people understand. That's the end for a long time.
And you and I had that discussion last week where we talked about the previous experiencer, even referenced in Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, how she was talking about whether or not the ETs would allow such a conflict, a nuclear conflict to take place, or how they would accept it. I want to get back to Dennis, who's answered us about the ETs that he was aware of during his NDEs. He says he can't see their bodies, however, he held their hands with a loving agape touch. So again, it's a case where often experiences have the feeling that there are ETs there, and sometimes this happens during the abduction scenario, but they're not able to see their faces. I was listening to another account earlier today from another experience.
As if it's on purpose.
Unable to see them. Yes.
Right. It's
as
on
if they're
purpose.
not able to, but they sense that they're there.
Right.
I've got an interesting point that's raised here by May 777 Abel. Are there divine entities that guide us through these life cycles? And Louis Kanjara, thank you very much for your super chat as well, says, do you believe in angels protecting us from parallel dimensions? Do you believe bad people's souls disappear forever? And that comes from Redwood City, California.
I think the truest sentence ever in the protonoia is the thought that dwells in the light is protecting you forever if you're linked to it. And the opposite of it is, what's the opposite of the light is the dark. It's the total opposite. Why was it set up like this? And what incredible intelligence set up all the dimensions? And it is all so much more complex than this Milky Way galaxy that we are in. And if there are 3,300, there's different numbers, some 3 million galaxies, 300,000 galaxies, the enormity of this matter universe and whatever else in frequencies it generates, and you have maybe 3 trillion, it's unimaginable, the frequencies that we are existing in, just to be on a planet that is matter, in a solar system, in a galaxy, in which I know that they're going to be confirming life, and that we have been kept so dumb and blind for so long in such an unnatural state. Don't you think that is really weird?
Yeah, it is. I'm still getting lots of fantastic experiences coming in from Uncle Dave's kitchen. Now, from my recollection, I think he also experienced the Phoenix Lights and perhaps has other UFO encounters. He says, "My NDE, I spoke with my nurse's deceased daughter, who gave me a message for her mother. My NDE was as a messenger for the little girl that drowned to share with her grieving mother. That's my proof." But he also goes on to say that he works in a pediatric hospice and says, "Our terminally ill children, but with very thin heads, not fat heads. Many of the children are the exact same beings again and again over the years."
Well, how many people might be here in the chat now who could get in touch with Ian, an alert that you've had an NDE perhaps that has taught you something, or like my experience as a child, where you feel like something is interacting with you for a period of time and teaching you, but you don't ever see anything that is biological or other. I'm very interested in those sort of experiences that I would guess that a lot more people have had in their evolution from childhood up to adulthood than they feel comfortable to talk about. And yet those are the kinds of aspects of life on Earth that might help us as a species a lot more. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, we welcome anyone to contact us at earthfiles@earthfiles.com or ian@earthfiles.com. Come direct to me if you want to, and I'll put them all forwards to Linda, and we'll look at your own experiences. Give us all the details. Stacy1440 says, "When I was about 4 to 6, and again it's in that category of very small children, saying, I remember coming out of my body every night and expanding or experiencing my whole soul and being huge, and then being terrified to have to get so small to get back into my body." That's incredible. And Dr. Dolores Misey says about when they were young, she says she has the same experience that her husband had of, as children, that they could get out of their body and walk.
So sorry, we don't know why we're having
with partners, and then find out that they've shared these same experiences.
Okay, and any details about what the experiences have been in terms of demonstration, teaching, the residues from what they remember?
Well, let's see if anyone can give us more information and share that with us as well as we go forward. People have also talked about near-death experiences where not necessarily where they popped out of their body as such, but where they've cheated death, which I think is another important one.
And how is the human actually cheating death, or is it the thought that dwells in the light, the infinite positive, the infinite in the yin and yang, the infinite light? Is that what can reach out, teach some souls, and then throughout infinity perhaps, always there is this instantaneous knowledge of what is happening to souls that have interacted with the thought that dwells in the light. And that's where protection and guidance and the missed bullet and all of those things come in, because there has been some dialogue between the infinite and the soul. I think that's what I feel happens.
I think so. Leslie Haddad says, "I had a near-death experience while driving down a two-lane road. I was bearing down to embrace for an absolute impact with the car pulling out from my right-hand side. And he says, my car turned rubbery and bent around a car that was to T-bone my side." That was, and I've heard this sort of thing before, where the accident should have happened and it doesn't happen. And it's for some reason, physics seems to have been suspended, and the actions that should have happened have been suspended, and there's been a miraculous escape.
And
so it looks like,
and in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, there are series in large chapters having to do with very specific people in the human abduction syndrome who have had enormous amounts of interaction with non-humans from childhood up. And in one particular case, even with an illustration, the female talking to me, she had been a teenager, and I think it was her mom who was driving the car, and she remembered it, drew it, illustrated, where they're coming to an intersection. And all of the cross street have cars. And she, as the child in the car, remembers that the car they were in, seeing a car coming from the left that was going to definitely, they were going to ram into it, and they didn't understand at all why anything was moving here. But their car rose up like an elevator and went right over the intersection and came down. And she said, my mom and I talked about that for a long time. We don't know how that happened, but we both knew. Our car rose up, an elevator moved and came down. And I have had that sort of thing happen sometimes in a car too, something like that. And is that the thought that dwells in the light, in infinite amounts of interaction with souls? Is that what triggers those kinds of, they're miracles. That's what a miracle is. Go ahead.
That's right. They are a miracle. I might need Brad to reconnect.
We're so sorry that for some reason we always have problems with the Ian line, and we don't know what to do about it. He's so valuable, and it's so wonderful, and I'm very sorry. Let me ask right now if there is anyone who's listening and feels comfortable to contact Ian and say that you have learned X in an NDE, you have learned Y in something else, meaning that you feel that your life has definitely, you've been being taught that something else extremely strong, which I think is the soul, can help in an odd way, and Ian is back. Okay.
Yeah, Linda, we're getting some book recommendations here as well. Guardian Jackpot says to read The Journey of Souls, the work of Michael Newton, PhD, and Many Mansions, work of Edgar Casey. And also AA references the book that I referenced last week, saying I remember an old paperback book called Phone Calls from the Dead by D. Scott Rogo and Bayliss. They were really good books.
And it was the same theme of Dan Drasin tonight and last week about the afterlife, and where afterlife used to be like a poetic word. It is now becoming truly a science word about other dimensions, other frequencies that are as real as this one, in which there seems to be some sort of a back and forth between, and it's easy for us to use the word dimensions, that we're in a dimension and the afterlife is in another dimension, but those are the best words I know, and that in some form the plasma soul can go into the afterlife dimension, and the afterlife dimension can go into other matter, other dimensions, and that is how big and complex the reality of the cosmos is, beyond our very confined view here on Earth in this solar system, in which there seems to be some sort of effort to place Earth in a box in which we are not to know the truth, that we're in a universe that is just teeming with life and consciousness and souls.
It's interesting you say that we're not supposed to know the truth, and you referenced again earlier, you said the things we're not taught in school.
Right.
May 777 Abel says, when I was a small child, I always dreamed about flying in the air from where I live. Well, I used to have those flying dreams, and many other people do. And they were so good. But sometimes as well, I'd be flying with someone alongside me. And that this is the other thing that other people suggest, that there was someone alongside them. So whether or not that relates to some sort of ET experience or not, I don't know. JG comes back to us as well. She was featured earlier on with one of her experiences. Wow, Linda, I've never travelled like that before, but I used to always make my bed float and rock for fun. Not that it was really floating, but it really felt like that. And I did it for years as a child. And because you mentioned about things we're not taught in school, it reminds me of what the people who tell us that when they go to these secret schools, or when the ETs taught them as children to raise their psychic abilities and to actually do things and have some control over small objects, etc.
The problem,
they were teaching us to regain these.
Yeah, the problem is that centuries have come down to the human that if you talk about these, you're called a witch, you're called some name that is totally the opposite. Being able to do and have access to these kinds of frequencies and education in them should help evolve humans past war, past all of the minutia that we get bogged down in. And instead, the very frequencies that could help us are those that get castigated by some sort of a control system. I remember having a discussion with Jacques Vallée back when I was working on cattle mutilations. And I think we were at something at the University of Colorado, and we were talking about the whole ET thing, and that being able to access extraterrestrial telepathy, take it in, go through all of the transitions that they knew would be part of the system, and being able to say, if we were educated, we might be able to evolve better, more positively, and yet we keep falling back into, is it true or is it not? It's frustrating. Go ahead.
I just want to acknowledge some more super chats. Thank you again to Moonbird, Mike Basil, and Yin Yang Glow for your super chats this evening. It's very appreciated. And Matthew Sims says, astral projecting, really wild stuff. It could feel like days go by, yet here in this reality, seconds may go by. So can you experience days in seconds? Perception of time is the key. I just wanted to say, Linda, when I had an experience in the hospital. I was in there for a small procedure, and I suddenly disappeared. I didn't know where I was or what was happening, but I do remember suddenly I was being brought around by the paramedics who said, we've had to come from the emergency room downstairs, and we brought you around. They said, we've never seen anyone go so white before, but I felt like I had lived another lifetime and years had gone by. I just couldn't believe. I had to then rebuild where I was to find myself again. It was as though I'd been gone for years.
Yeah, and time manipulation is a big part of this, without any question. And it's how do the ETs basically freeze our minds and everything and be gone. I remember there was a case where somebody realized that they were picking, it was really mundane, like they were picking up a book and opening the book, and they didn't know that that was the bridge to something like 9 years that they had been gone someplace else. The question they couldn't answer was, I thought I was there in body form, like I was on Earth. But Linda, how could I be gone for 9 years and remember opening up a book as the last thing I remember, and then realizing that somehow something happened and my family, everybody, they didn't know I was gone, and something was using me on Earth for that time period while I was someplace else. And he said that is a real insight into how sophisticated the ET world and interface with us can be. I've thought about that a lot, golly, if you wouldn't even be aware that you were living another life for 9 years someplace else and they were there taking, and that everything, no one would know that there was a change in that person. That was the implication.
Yeah, and someone in our audience this evening earlier on was saying in the chat how in their dreams they seem to be living a parallel life in a different dream.
Yeah.
And that they interchange from one to another. The Muse is in the chat tonight and says, as a young child, I used to float out of body all the time, but it was not the same experience as the out of body experience I had as an adult. And Liz Starwalker, and I'd love to hear more from Liz, and I hope she can share with us. And contact us at ian@earthfiles.com and earthfiles@earthfiles.com. She says, the ET I had contact with was a tall white type with long hair and a bluish-green jumpsuit. How many times have we heard that, Linda?
Yeah.
And she says, I have seen myself in that body type on life suspension, projecting my consciousness to this body on Earth. So,
wow.
Liz, contact us, please. Tell us more.
Yeah, how complex. And it reminds me of that strange cocktail party with the tall man talking to me about UFOs and ETs, and that it was something that would tie in so much later, as if something AI is manipulating, mixing, matching, changing, blocking, mimicking, non-mimicking, whole patterns like a chess game. And we humans are only allowed one slice, officially. Not unofficially, but officially. It's so strange. Has anybody in the audience tonight ever had one of the black cape, where it is like a cape and it falls over the face like this and comes like this and to the floor? Had an entity at night either wake you up or before you went to sleep, somehow comes through walls or the ceiling or the floor or windows, or comes in somehow for reasons that are not always very clear, but it happens a lot to people, whether you all realize that. Has anybody had one of these interactions with the dark hooded figures? I would just like to know. I throw that out there.
Let's hear. Yeah, people join us in the chat and let us know if there's anyone who's had those hooded figures experiences. I know I've spoken to people who have had experiences with the hooded figures. May 777 Abel says, what could be the range of how many lifetimes one has here, as well as other realms and in other states of life? I think that there was a calculation actually that if all the people who'd ever lived on Earth, it's been calculated they could have all reincarnated. I think it's 127 times is the current figure.
Well,
so we could have all been here 127 times. That's an average.
And are certain bloodlines, which I think are a key, assigned to different planets, to different galaxies, to different universes, to different dimensions, and that the complexity of the layering of everything in multiple dimensions with multiple timelines and control of time. And we're babies. Well, maybe we're living a life of being like a child on purpose. And we may have lived in infinities before now, who knows? But it is, to me, one of the more interesting parts of life now is going to the New York Times Science on Tuesdays and seeing what are they picking up on, because so many astrophysicists and information that is coming through the James Webb Telescope and others are like that headline. Scientists discovered something alarming. This universe shouldn't actually exist. So now it's even the world of astrophysics is being tumbled upside down, let alone those of us who are convinced that extraterrestrial life have been on this planet, as I was told in December 1999, 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations at least 270 million years ago, have been in conflict over Earth, over Mars, possibly over Ganymede, a moon of Jupiter, and beyond. And the thing about this, it is almost like a haunting issue. The ET level of intelligence fights each other, it seems like, all the time. And we are supposed to be a genetically manipulated primate from evolutionary genetic manipulation by extraterrestrial civilizations, competing with each other on Earth, over Earth, and beyond. And yet, they keep their creation dumb and blind, or someone does. And what is to be gained by creating life with consciousness that hooks into the thought that dwells in the light and other frequencies, and that we are evolving constantly? So why is it in the interest of any life form to keep a new one dumb and blind? That makes me nervous. It makes me nervous. It may be why people like Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso in the Pentagon, with Eisenhower, with General Trudeau, said that they were nervous about what was the truth in what they already learned and knew. And this is his statement, that he agreed with William Mills Tompkins, who was a young person working in the Navy. And this is this famous quote that rings through history, and I think it's absolutely true, but we sure need to understand it better. World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. And how much of that is ringing today on Earth? And where will those rings go? Go ahead, Ian.
Linda, yeah, you referenced Colonel Corso. It was fascinating as well that the start of this 3-week series that we've run now on the afterlife was the declassification of the CIA and Pentagon report.
Yes, on June, I think it was June 6, 1983.
Yeah, of which I'm not sure that our audience know. There is a page 25 that was not released, and that was followed up by the Freedom of Information Act.
And has been released.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that page 25 was ever released. And,
I think it has been to somebody. Yeah.
Okay, we'll refer back to that. But I wanted to circle back to, was it a Department of Defense person who told you that the recycling of souls was the machinery of this universe?
Yes.
Where did that conversation come from? So that, again, came from a military source.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why when I heard William Mills Tompkins say those words to me in that 5-hour recorded interview I did with him, which I think is just remarkable, and that was, and he said, one of the reasons, he was 90, I can't remember, he was 93 when I interviewed him, and I think he died in 94 or 95. And he said, you need to understand and hear these words, Linda. This is what we're dealing with. World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. So what is happening today on Earth in 2025? If we had the ability to access much more advanced intelligences than we are because we have been kept dumb and blind, then maybe everybody would finally opt for, let's not fight each other anymore, and let's not be betrayed anymore by those that come bearing gifts and they only mean to hurt us. That all of Earth could become a flourishing place without hate, without physical violence. And there's just something in me. It feels like I have known Earth when it was nothing was dying, that everything was flourishing. And what if it is somebody else's laboratory, and has been all along, a laboratory of life that is blessed by the thought that dwells in the light and has no relationship with the dark? I think that actually counts. I think it actually matters. And on that note, agape hug to all of my fellow beings on Earth and our furry souls, the cats, the dogs, everywhere, innocent life everywhere. And that babies need to grow up surrounded by frequencies that help separate the thought and the light from the dark, so it's very clear to evolving beings where to choose. I love you guys. See you next week.
Turn on closed captions for YouTube videos by clicking the white CC button on the lower right. The default language for Linda's videos is English. If you would like to see the captions in another language, click on the white settings button next to the CC button. Select Subtitles CC and then select Auto Translate. Select a language and the captions will now appear in that language.
Sort of gone through, and they will hold their heads. I never had a cat do that before. And they'll pull against the comb, helping me get out snarls. And I think it's the best they've ever been.